And this becomes more about impact and legacy than it becomes about money making. And when I was in my early 20s, my entrepreneurship was all about how do I get rich? How do I become financially free? Now that I'm in my early 40s, it's how do I have impact? How do we make New Zealand a better place?
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.
Hi, I'm Paul Spain, futurist and chief executive at Gorilla Technology. I love contributing to the success of individuals and their organisations. New Zealand Business Podcast is all about this by helping you learn from our country's most notable leaders. In this episode, I head to Cromwell in stunning Central Otago to sit down for a fascinating chat with Mike Casey, entrepreneur, cherry farmer, and chief executive of Rewiring, Aotearoa. Mike co-founded GradConnection, which was later acquired by Seek, and Fishburners, Australia's largest startup community, before coming back to New Zealand and establishing the country's, in fact the world's, first fully electric cherry orchard, Forest Lodge Orchard, producers of the cherries sold under the Electric Cherries brand. New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by One New Zealand alongside Gorilla Technology, making tech enablement and cybersecurity easy for mid-size and smaller organisations. And by Outrun Global, remote staffing to help your local teams work smarter, not harder.
Right, Mike Casey, great to have you on the New Zealand Business Podcast.
Thank you for coming down. It's a pleasure to have you fly all the way from the other end of the country down here to little old Cromwell. It's quite the privilege. Thank you.
Oh, loving it. It's a stunning day here. Incredible part of the world to be hanging out. Like to start with hearing a little bit about your upbringing. Where were you born?
So Wellington. Spent my whole life in Wellington, actually. Went to Wellington College, Victoria University, computer science degree.
What was it like for you growing up in Wellington? What was your childhood like? And if you kind of look back and see the connections to the things that you've done later in life and business and so on, what connections can you see to your entrepreneurial bent, to your technology interests?
Yeah, I would say that I'd probably say grew up in a lower middle class family, reasonably well looked after and loved, which was obviously hugely important. But always had that taste for wanting to, go a bit further in life, I think. Mum worked hard. She was a bureaucrat in Wellington. Dad was an entrepreneur that struggled from one startup to the next, but also taught me so much about being a startup founder myself. And yeah, so by the time I went to university, I realized computer science was where it was at because I really wanted to be an entrepreneur and not answer.
So you weren't put off that from, what were the things that your dad did in terms of his businesses?
So he ended up selling his business only a few years ago now. It was a technology, like a SaaS product for accommodation providers here in New Zealand.
Okay.
It's called Secom.
Yeah.
Before that, he went through a series of different ventures that, that with varying levels of success, as many entrepreneurs really do. But I don't know, I just always looked at him as a kid as just how passionate he was about all this kind of stuff. Mum and dad split up when I was 6 years old. That's because mum, I think wanted the stable income that my entrepreneurial father couldn't necessarily provide, but also later on in life, my dad's is an ACT Party candidate. My mum's a big supporter of the Green Party. So you can see why they're both happily remarried now. And I got the benefits of both of those worlds, right? Largely brought up by my mum in a very stable and loving environment and got to see my dad do amazing things with business. And so, yeah, I feel like I was very, very fortunate to, grow up in a household where we didn't necessarily have a huge amount of money, but way more money than other people in New Zealand. So being very grateful for that and sort of realizing, there was a bit of taste to see where we could go and where we could take it. And ultimately, the entrepreneurial spirit led me in the path that I've been down, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah. And the sorts of things that you did at school, were there things there that when you look at them were helpful? Did you do things that were kind of leadership-wise, sport-wise, or, were you very academic?
No, I was, I'm thick as two planks, mate. Let's be honest. No. terrible academic. Very middle of the bell curve in almost all sporting endeavors. Like I'm really, really good at being mediocre at a lot of things. Enjoyed my sport, enjoyed my mates at school. I don't think there was anything in particular. Like I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur. Always knew. And so I think the only thing was the flavor of entrepreneur that I was going to be. And obviously went down the computer science path when I realized that you can make really valuable businesses with bugger all capital. And that was what led me down that path of realizing that was the pathway forward. And that was in the early 2000s, right? I finished Wellington College in 2001, started my computer science degree in 2002. By 2006, founded the company that went on to sell in 2019. So,
right. So coming out of university, what did you do?
Went into the Westpac graduate program.
Yeah.
Because to some extent, people in my life were advising me, stable job, do the business later. And
did you learn some valuable lessons from being in an environment like that of a large organization with varying structures and so on, or do you think?
Sure, I learned that this is not for me. And I remember one of my direct lines at the time, I was having a bitch about something being stupid, some process or something like that. And he goes, "See those things on the windows there? They're blinds, not bars. Feel free to leave any time." And I was like, it's really sage advice. And so it wasn't long until after that where, I met the great thing about it is the co-founders that I founded that business with, I met at Westpac. And, we decided that this is something that we wanted to do. We're all graduates. We didn't think that, we'd been exposed to all the opportunities available when we left university, that ultimately there had to be a better solution out there for, advertising graduate opportunities to students so they didn't miss out on things. And we decided to do that. We founded it in New Zealand in, I think, 2006. And by the time of 2008, we realized that there was a lot more money in graduate programs in Australia. So moved over to Sydney.
A lot more people too, right?
A lot more people, a lot more students, a lot more corporates, a lot more positions. So we moved over to Sydney and gave it a good crack there, and it worked really well, thankfully.
So the similarities between New Zealand and Australia, how close was that? Because sometimes, something will start in New Zealand, it'll be clear there's a global opportunity. Sometimes it's like, well, maybe there's an opportunity in Australia, but obviously that translated very well.
Oh, I mean, I love Australia. I love Australians. They're very, very welcoming of us. I think like the one way that I describe it, like no one, unless you're from Christchurch, no one asks you what school you went to, right? Unless you're from Christchurch. Sydney, everyone asks you what school you went to. Like it's hugely important for social hierarchy and stuff like that. So as a joker from New Zealand, they're just like, oh yeah, is that a good school, was it? Yeah. Oh, it's the best school. Yeah, okay, great. You're in the club there, and so that was quite powerful. And then, in 2008, when we moved over there, the tech startup scene was just becoming a big thing. So so many of my mates over there did so well in the technology startup scene in Sydney. And, we were kind of like the OG kind of crew over there, I think. And I ended up founding a co-working space called Fishburners, which ended up being absolutely massive over in Sydney, where we just collected as many entrepreneurs as we could and put them all together in one room and just, learned off each other. A big fan of the saying, you are what your friends are. So make your friends successful and you'll be successful as well. And
so how did you connect with that group and manage to, make that work? Because as you say, being around the right people, can completely, transform the trajectory of someone's life.
Just got on the tins with them.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, really. I mean, one of the unhealthy aspects of it was the amount of social capital that was tied up in drinking at the time. But, I was in my early 20s and that was a really fun thing to do. So went to the pub a lot, went to all the drinks and the meetups of the, entrepreneurs that were there at the time, started hanging out with a few of them. You just slowly integrate your way in when they realize you're not some prick from New Zealand, you're actually a pretty decent dude. And sort of just grew it from there. But some of the advice that I got from those people was hugely important for shaping the business that we created and the entrepreneur that I became. And I think even realizing things like, so much of entrepreneurship is luck, right place, right time. Yes, you've got to be in it to win it.
You've got to make your own luck to it.
You've got to make your own
degree
luck
as well, right? If you're not there, you're not going to have the luck.
I think that's what I was saying. If you roll the dice enough times, your numbers will come up. Or fortune favors the brave is another, really good, I think, entrepreneurial. So you've got to be brave to capitalize on the fortune.
Not every player's ever is going to work out though, and some you can roll the dice for 20 years and you might not land it right. But if you're not there, you've got zero chance.
Exactly. There's entrepreneurs in Sydney that I really rated. I thought they were incredible entrepreneurs that were never successful, never got an exit, floundered around, and unfortunately, didn't have the success that they dreamed of. And other people that I just thought were absolute dropkicks that sold their businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars. So, it goes all sorts of ways. But yes, I think the number one thing is you have to be in it to win it. I'm so glad that I was in it.
Yeah. Now, I want to hear a little bit more about Fishburners, right?
Yep.
Was that something that for you, the main benefit was, the people you connected with and so on, or was that actually a viable and a good, good business over time, and how did that play out?
Everything I've done has been by accident. Getting the job at Westpac and meeting my co-founders is like, okay, this is, fortune favors the brave, I guess, right? When it came to starting the Fishburners, we were subletting, our business was subletting off a much larger technology business that got acquired and shut down. And they were like, one day they were just not there anymore. And we were left with our little desks in our little room. Landlord comes in and goes, well, you can take over the lease if you want. This is how much it costs, or you can get out. And we were like, ouch. Well, we can't afford this giant office space, so what are we going to do? And, we just had the idea, well, let's go down to IKEA and buy a whole bunch of desks and then start like renting the desks out at $100. I think it was $100 a month, it's that cheap at the time. And if we fill this office full of 18 people, then we'll be able to make rent. So that's kind of what we decided to do. And we went
so you negotiated some sort of flexible terms, so you weren't immediately committing to a 10-year lease or anything, right?
I think we did commit, knowing full well that if we just walk away, if our business folded, like whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't tied back to you.
It wasn't tied back to us or anything, but it was successful. People craved it. This is before co-working was even a thing, and all of a sudden people were in there. And
what year were you kind of talking at that point?
2008.
Yeah,
2009 maybe. The problem is that we hadn't thought about all of the things that come with running a co-working space. Like, was there a cleaner? No. Have we budgeted for a cleaner? No. There was about 1,000 different keys cut to the office. So I was like, this is probably a bit of a security risk. And it's like, who's going to actually chase the rent when someone doesn't pay it and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, just telling the story about how successful this had been, but not successful enough in the right way. Like, the growing pains associated with this. And I found another entrepreneur in Sydney who was like, well, I'll just take out a bigger lease for you and give you enough funding to get a receptionist and a cleaner and stuff. And you just sort out the pricing model and pay me back when you're ready. So that happened, and so all of a sudden Fishburners became actually a formalized little entity. It was a not-for-profit because the value for us wasn't in the real estate. The value was in surrounding ourselves with awesome people.
Great.
And then that led to another thing, and then Google was sponsoring it, and Optus was sponsoring it, and the New South Wales government was sponsoring it, and then it ended up being, a whole thing in the middle of the central city across multiple floors that would have, by the time we'd finished up, housed thousands upon thousands of startups. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah, and I guess you would have heard lots and lots of stories, and lots would have come out of that.
Yep.
And you certainly wouldn't have known up front, and even afterwards you won't know of all of the conversations and all of the things that actually help facilitate it. Yep. Right? Like, there's something pretty special about getting people together and able to nudge each other along and help each other out.
Oh, totally. And I'm just like totally fond of the experience, the relationships that I've still got with so many founders. Like, there's some pretty successful founders out there that would pick up the phone if I called them right now, and that is awesome experience, but they weren't successful when I knew them, and so that's really powerful. And they've been really supportive of what I've been doing here now with my new business on farm, and sort of blown away by what we've been able to achieve and the coverage that we've managed to get. But yeah, I don't know. It all comes back to there's something really special about, fighting in the same trench alongside good people. In the case of co-working and entrepreneurship, you were never really fighting the same fight, but you were fighting it together. And that was quite cool.
You've been in business, you're in business, but the non-profit side is, has been part of the picture for you, now more than once. Anything that stands out from that time there with Fishburners that that really sticks with you?
I think the non-profit thing, like, you saw big co-working spaces come in and then scale up massively and then go bust and all of that kind of stuff. And for me, the not-for-profit was a way of cementing to people so that they would trust it, that this is actually something that is about community. It was much more garage band rather than Taylor Swift, if that makes sense. Like, we were just trying to create a good environment for other entrepreneurs. And, people look back at it now and they're like, oh, wow, you did such an amazing thing for the Sydney startup scene. It's like, yeah, but I didn't intend to do that. Like, it kind of grew awesomely because it was so community focused. It was focused on the actual people involved. Now, when it comes to what I'm doing in the energy space, it's about focusing on the people and what's best for our people. So that's where the charitable kind of not-for-profit angle, I think, comes from in a big way. And for me now, I'm in a position where I've made more than enough money for my wife and my family, to be comfortable. We own a nice cherry farm in Central Otago. We're doing okay. So now, how do you maximize your impact? And this becomes more about impact and legacy than it becomes about money making. And when I was in my early 20s, my entrepreneurship was all about how do I get rich? How do I become financially free? Now that I'm in my early 40s, it's how do I have impact? How do we make New Zealand a better place? And I think that the whole journey with Fishburners was very much the same along the way. It was, how can we give back? How can we help foster a good community? How can we benefit from that community? So that's kind of where that came from. And I didn't want to ever make money out of the co-working space because then I wouldn't be focusing on what was really important, which was my own startup that needed to be successful.
Yeah. And how easy was it to bring others into the Fishburners story? You talked about others supporting it, whether it was at a government level or businesses that wanted to support it. Was that something that just happened quite naturally and organically?
I think so, and you organically, but also you've got to be very generous with your attribution. Like if you draw a circle around your territory and like guard it with a spear, people aren't going to come in. But when you let people come in and use the space for their own benefit, like it would grow, quite awesomely, quite quickly. So I'd say that's probably the number one thing. It's just, like when you're wanting something to grow and when you want to have impacts, you invite people into your circle. You don't try and protect your patch. And so, I'll always be known as a founder of Fishburners, but there's dozens of other founders of Fishburners. The people that put money into Fishburners early on are the ones that ultimately probably made it more successful than I did. I'll always be a co-founder of GradConnection, shared with 3 other guys. Now where I am running the cherry orchard here in Central Otago, I'm a co-founder with my business partner who is an old high school mate. You bring people in and you're always very inviting, and bringing people in. And I think the more and more people that you can help surf the wave, the better off society is. Yeah.
Now let's delve more into the GradConnection story.
Yep.
So you moved to Sydney. What happened then? What was the thing that made it really work for you in the Australian market?
Well, the first lesson I learned is as an engineer, I thought, I'm going to build this product that everyone's going to want. So I built this product, and then we tried to sell it, and no one wanted it. And it made me realize this is the hardest way.
How did you try and sell it?
Just set up meetings. I've created this new product. I think it's going to be great. Come in. It's like, oh, no, not really.
So who were you selling to at that point?
This was corporates. This was HR people who ran graduate programs.
Right. So you were looking for them to like buy a subscription, or
it was like a pool of CVs of graduates. Right. And it was like you could go in, you can search, you can find the ones you want, you can invite them to apply or something. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Even remember it's that long ago exactly what the product was, but I went. Well, the thing that I had completely underestimated is that it was not the way the culture worked. The culture worked that the graduate would apply, and then they would get their pool of candidates, and then they would go through their process, and that was the way that it would work. And so I went in there and I tried to sell this product, and was like, nah, don't want that. That's not interesting. And I was like, why did I spend all this time developing this bloody product when I could have just gone and spoken to the potential customers in the first place? So then I was like, we just made up a product that we hadn't built yet, and went in and tried to sell that. And oh my gosh, people started buying it.
Everyone wanted it. So initially you didn't have that product market fit.
Yeah.
Then you heard from the market
what
they wanted.
Yeah.
And then when you offered that back to them, there was immediate interest.
And then what made us successful entrepreneurs was promising the earth and somehow delivering on those promises, right? So it became, we're launching this on the 1st of March in line with when the graduate application season opens up. You'd like to be one of the first on our new website, which is just like an advertising job board style platform. And what we'll do is, it provides an awesome calculator so a graduate can come in and they can say what they're looking for, and then we'll tell them what the highest matched employer is. So if you offer free parking, for example, we'll add that into the list and all these kinds of things. They loved it. And so, yeah, we then worked as hard as we could to launch that on the 1st of March 2009. And I think we might have had 20 employers that signed up at $1,500 each. By the time we sold it in 2019, the average employer was probably paying $20-something thousand to advertise on our website, and we had
This is sort of a
500
monthly type
employers.
of commitment,
No,
was it?
annual. So
okay.
the thing
Yeah.
about graduate programs is they were annual. You
Oh,
apply
yeah,
once
that's
a year
right.
for them.
Yeah.
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 So, but what the biggest selling point was that the information would be up on the site all year round, and they could toggle applications on and off whenever you liked, because ultimately, what was happening was that people were missing out on that information because they didn't show up to the careers fair at the right time, or they, for whatever reason, missed the magazine or the Seek job board ad at the time. So we were like, no, your employer brand is going to be up there all year round. You're going to talk about your values and what you do and all that kind of stuff. And then you can vary your content whenever you like. And by the way, you can turn applications on and off whenever you like. And that was really the thing that started to get that over the line. Kevin Rudd, favorite Australian Prime Minister of all time, only because he made a rule that a certain portion of Australian government spend had to be on small businesses with, I think, staff below 20. And so we became a tick box for a lot of businesses that were, looking to, a lot of government departments to advertise their graduate programs. And that's really what seeded a lot of our early stage success.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of the luck piece.
Absolutely. Right place, right time. Fortune favors the brave. Yeah.
Now, walking forward to selling, what did that look like? How did that come about? Was that something where you went out to the market? Was it something where you were getting interest from multiple entities, or was it just the one opportunity that came up?
It got really interesting, because when you're as a reasonably fresh graduate creating a graduate job board, you think this is the most relevant thing in the world, right? And in our earliest to late 20s, amazing time, parties on campus, all of these kinds of things. It was fun, right? Get into your early 30s, and I literally fell out of love with my startup 5 years before I sold it, right? And
Ouch.
But the problem is, all your chips are in the middle of the table, right? There's no liquidity event on the horizon. It's very hard to sell. You've got three founders that, the other thing is, we started the business when we were 23, sold it when we were 33, 34. There's a lot of growing up, a lot of relationship change during that time. And so we started to get to the point where we all wanted different things in business, and there was a bit of friction associated with that as well. Lucky for us, right place, right time, fortunate again. Seek came along and decided that we were valuable because they didn't have access to, the people that were looking at getting their first professional job. That was the part of the market that we controlled. And to be fair to Seek, they were a really, really good acquirer that, offered a really fair price. But also we were a startup and they were a publicly listed entity. So to get all the ducks in a row and get everything up to a point took 18 months.
Wow.
Right? 18
months. That
audits
must have been
and all sorts of carry on.
Pretty taxing on you.
Hugely taxing at a time where we were experiencing friction amongst the co-founders. And a couple of times, like for those accountants that are in the, listening on, basically we had to convert from cash accounting to GAAP accounting, and that seemed to magically shove half the revenue back a year and half the revenue forward a year. So the year that they were buying our business didn't make us look like we were very successful at all.
Oh, dear.
And so there was the sale and purchase agreement was taken off the table at the 11th hour and put back on. Nothing nefarious, just part of that acquisition process and the way that it went down. And we shopped around to see if there was some other buyers out there. There are a couple of other buyers out there, but nothing like as creditable and as, I think, compassionate and open to buying our business as what Seek was. And so I think, at the end of the day, they were very, very good acquirers of our business, very responsible. They weren't there to, try and screw us over, which I think in a lot of cases, a lot of business transactions, that can happen. So that was super valuable, to have that happen as well. But that's why I was 10 kilos heavier than I am now when I sold my business, right? You see the first term sheet, and you start spending that money in your head, you start planning things, and all of a sudden it gets taken away, and then it's half as much as it was, and all these kinds of things. It was a really stressful, tricky time. And I think that's the other part, like when we're taught as young entrepreneurs, it's like, oh, imagine the day that you sell your business, it's going to be a massive party, and it's going to be so anticlimactic. Like by the end of it, you're like, oh, thank Christ that's over, because you've just been through the ringer to get get out the other side there. And so it wasn't. And so the whole building of the cherry orchard was really my celebration of that success rather than the sale of the previous business. Yeah.
Wow. And, where were you at in terms of family and so on and at that time? Because these things can take can have a huge impact on family. I think you mentioned earlier around alcohol being part of the story. These things aren't unique, right? These obviously the particular situation is, but the sort of pressures that it creates. I was catching up with someone last week, and he was sort of walking through me through a little bit of his story over dinner, and it was like, basically, he was making this comment because he's like, no, I don't drink anymore, but there was this time in my life where it was, drugs and alcohol were what was fueling things. How did all that fit together for you?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is how appreciative I am of my wife. Like, we moved over in 2008 for me to start a technology startup. She went over there. She's an accountant. She got a good job. She supported me for 4 or 5 years as my girlfriend. I think my in-laws were like, what the hell are you doing with this deadbeat? But she stuck with me. And so on the other side, selling the business and having her get the reward from that is, super important. But also, we had 2 young kids in Sydney. And that's when I think priorities, started to change in a big way, why we wanted to move back to Aotearoa, why, we were struggling a little bit with some co-founder friction and things like that. The most stressful week of my life, my second child, my little boy, was born, and 3 days later we signed that sale and purchase agreement finally. It was hectic, right? And I'm not going to lie to you, I was using alcohol to sort of moderate thinking and everything a little bit. I still enjoy a beer every now and then. I think one of the great things about moving to rural New Zealand is you can't drink because then you can't get home. So you immediately change. And, I've just completely moved away from it now, where now I enjoy a beer after a mountain bike ride, or, a couple of beers down at the pub, very, very rarely, with some old mates and stuff like that. And I just think that, from a family perspective, we were very lucky that we sold the business when we did. And I think from an outcome perspective, it was too. We sold the business in 2019. Moved back here, and 3 months later we planted trees in the ground, and the world shut down.
So you were able to effectively just step out. You weren't locked into a
no. So
X years again, of kind of needing to be
sometimes like earnouts are burnouts, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing here is, I was going to have an earnout like the rest of my co-founders, but the moment that we signed the sale and purchase agreement, I was on paternity leave because we got bought by a private, a publicly listed company that had, parental leave policies. So I was like, okay, well, we'll go on paternal leave because that's what was required. And I took the extended option. And by the time that was up, I really didn't want to go back. I'd kind of moved on psychologically, and they were like, yeah, we're running the business fine. We don't really want you back. So it was like the perfect, exit.
How convenient.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, a lot of the time when you buy businesses, you need the founders to stay on.
That's it. Yeah.
I was not around when that transition
was happening. Yeah.
And it turns out I didn't need to be.
They'd figured it out by then.
Again, incredibly fortunate. I know a number of founders at the moment, a number of my friends that are going through exits that are really struggling because you kind of lose your soul in exchange for money, and that only goes so far. And it's willpower is a muscle, and like any muscle, it fatigues quite quickly when you use it too much. So yeah.
Well, we're here, right on the orchard. So tell us about moving back to New Zealand and the story of Electric Cherries.
Move all again kind of unplanned and kind of by accident. I love the idea of farming, but we moved back to New Zealand. My wife really wanted to come home, and I kind of really wanted to move to this area because I love the skiing and the outdoors and that kind of stuff. So that was the compromise. Moved to Cromwell specifically. We're looking for houses in Queenstown, Wanaka, that kind of thing, and found a farm 30 minutes south of Wanaka for the same price as a 4-bedroom home in Wanaka. So that was, my wife's not an accountant who just loves bargains. And once she saw this place and the value for money, she was just like, we're buying this place, aren't we? I didn't really have much of a say, but
I mean, incredible getting here, and then you get here, we're looking up, there's snow on the mountains, there's, you know, stunning in the other direction with like Dunstan and so on. I mean, must have been pretty hard to say anything other than, yeah, this is a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing was, it was the ideal house that came with 9 hectares of land. And so as an entrepreneur, I was like, well, this is an opportunity. What are we going to do with it? And through, you know, a little bit of analysis, realized what was good to grow here. You know, as I said before, like a child that always was fascinated by farming. So 9,300 cherry trees later, we were on our journey, and the new chapter had kind of begun. And this is my creative outlet now of, you know, when I was in my early 20s, a technology startup was ideal. Now I'm in my early 40s with three young children, you know, and my wife living here, and a farm is ideal. You know, it's still business. It's still amazing. There's still so much to innovate on and do differently, as you know. That's why you're here. This is my creative outlet, and I'm just super excited about how successful we're going to make it. Yeah,
fantastic. When you look at it, you know, next to I guess a traditional, you know, tech startup type business. Yes, there's you know, a lot of tech involved in, well, anything these days. But you look at the tech startup world, and you know, it's intense, crazy hours, no guarantees around outcomes.
Yep.
How different is that to the farm? It must be sort of, you know, night and day. You must have been able to spreadsheet out and figure out a lot of things before you started.
Well,
you know, there's no 100%.
And then you realise how
guarantees.
fickle farming is, and how markets and weather are both there to screw you over, right?
Sure.
It is different. Like, I think the big thing here is you could see how other people had done it, and there was a much clearer path in front. Do I miss the hockey stick opportunities? Sometimes. But would I go after it again? I don't think so. You know, now that I'm in the position that I'm in, I think with all entrepreneurship, the key thing is not the hockey stick growth, but it's how proud you are of the business that you are running. You know, your business is part of your identity. And when you're in love with your business, it's just amazing what you can achieve, right? And when you're not in love with your business, it can be very depressing and all-consuming. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm so glad that I did a technology startup, and I never want to do one again. You know, I think, and that's just me acknowledging the fact that I'm at the next stage of my life now, which is, you know, having impact in different ways. Yeah.
So, looking at the orchard, looking at the farm, what are the things that you can be most relaxed about versus the, you know, where the variables are, and was there, you know, much surprise to that as you got into the realities of it, right? Because it's so different to the tech startup.
The chap
world.
that's just down there, he's my business partner. His name's Ewan. You know, he ultimately is the one that does the majority of the farming. So when we started 9,300 baby cherry trees, there's a lot of work to train those trees in the way they need to be trained in order to be productive. But now we're at full production. It got to the point where, you know, the orchard didn't need 2 full-time staff. And so he stayed on. He's become the orchard manager looking after that. I just become, you know, his bitch really at harvest, you know, pick up all the jobs and do everything that he needs done, you know, at that really critical time in harvest. But for the majority of the year, he's the one that's doing the tree maintenance and making sure that this orchard runs, you know, like absolute clockwork. And that's allowed me to go out and do this new thing, which is rewiring Aotearoa and taking what we've learned here on the farm and applying that to the whole country.
Fantastic. What's the total output on an annual basis here?
Output in terms of cherry volume, money,
I guess both.
Yeah. So in a good year, we will make about 80 tons of export cherries, which is about 8 million cherries. This season was not a good year, and I think we were about 55 tons, or about 55 million cherries. Prices on the market were good. Damage to the cherries due to rain and cold weather and all that kind of stuff was pretty bad. So we just broke even this season, which is, you know, unfortunate. Enough to pay the loans down, not enough to get a return on investment. But the year prior, you know, amazing. And so that's what it goes through. But, you know, like in total, all up, a really rounded figure, probably about $5 million is what we've invested in getting this farm off the ground. And, you know, we'd probably make about, in a good season, $300,000 worth of profit a year off our cherries, and about more off the, a bit less, but, you know, off the electricity from our solar system. So you can sort of see it's, you know, it's that standard 10% kind of yield, I think would be the way that I would describe it. 8%, 10%, that kind of thing. Yep.
And how much variability is there? You talked about was it 55 tons?
Yep.
This last season. How I guess you probably haven't been here long enough to sort of see the complete sort of peaks and troughs in terms of what that can end up
the
being.
season prior I had, I think 80, I can't remember exactly offhand, 80 ton, 85 ton, something like that, and that was about the optimum amount. Like when it comes to growing produce, it's not just the tons though, like the size of the cherry ultimately gets a better price in the export
big
market.
cherry, right?
You want a big cherry.
Yeah.
So those 30 to 32 mil cherries, you might be making 25, 30, 40 bucks a kilo, depending on the market.
Wow.
Those 20s, 28, 26s and 24s might be more like $10, $12 a kilo. So it's really important that you get really good at growing good, big, firm cherries that are tasty, and that's when the money really starts to roll in. And that is a talent. It's talent, it's discipline, and it's luck. And the luck is the weather in particular.
And there's other variabilities, like the different varieties that give you a length of season, and depending on when different fruit are sort of maturing, as to then where that fits in with international markets. Maybe walk us a little bit through that.
So I mean, most of our cherries go overseas to Southeast Asia, China. One of the big cherry buying times is Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year. They like to make it difficult and shift that date every year. We've got it much easier here with Christmas, as we know exactly what date it's going to fall every year. But, it can be late February or it can be late January, and that just completely shifts things around. So you have different varieties, different tastes. They're all amazing and their differences, actually. But you'll always have one variety that was best timed for that sort of Lunar New Year period. That's sort of the big thing. But the other thing, going fully electric and then marketing, the Electric Cherries brand has opened up all these new customers within New Zealand that now order over mail order, which is hugely awesome for us because we basically sell at export prices, but we don't have to pay to ship the cherries to Taiwan or Beijing or Shanghai or wherever it might be. So we actually make more money selling to New Zealanders as a result of that. And that's awesome as well. Every energy nerd and climate nerd in the country now buys Electric Cherries because of the metaphor of what it kind of shows and does. And as a result, we're more secure with potentially more profit, which is super exciting to me.
I love that, and I love the innovation in terms of the approach that you've taken to that. Maybe you can walk listeners through, what are the options that you've put up on your website, and how does that actually live out across the orchard, where you've got the signs of a family that's sponsoring a particular part of the orchard.
We call it adopt a cherry tree.
It's great.
Your whānau can literally buy a cherry tree in our orchard for a period of time. So we have people adopting them for 5 years, 10 years, 1 year, whatever it might be. That entitles you to the one tree shares worth of cherries that come out of the orchard every year. So it's about 6 kilos, and that 6 kilos will be put in a box and sent straight to your whānau. It's a lot of cherries, really good for parties, really good for festive occasions, really good for the summer holiday period, really good to share around with other people in your community. And I think, we've got 9,300 cherry trees, and I think 400, 500 of them have been adopted out. And if you don't want to commit to 6 kilos of cherries on an annual subscription, the other thing is essentially just buying cherries by the box, directly from us during season, and that's been really good for us as well. We sell at the same gate return as what we get overseas, but we don't have to put them on jumbo jets and fly them to the other side of the world to get that, to realize that price. And that's been really powerful for making us more profitable, and has given people the opportunity to support our business as well, which has been cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I've got a friend, who's from down this way, and he come down to visit his family. He brought some fruit back, and I had some cherries at home, and he's like, those are rubbish. You're buying the bottom of the barrel cherries from your local supermarket. Here's what real cherries are like. And I think as Kiwis, we don't always, recognize that the best is going offshore.
Correct.
And then we're getting the leftovers because there's not a big enough market and demand, and probably even just awareness, right? I mean, I think we've seen in a bunch of areas where there now is a bit more premium, product available in our supermarkets and so on, but often you actually just won't see what's going offshore.
Central Otago, best stone fruit in the world.
Yeah.
Hawke's Bay, best pip fruit in the world, right? And all of that heads overseas. I'll tell it to you from a farmer's perspective, just so you understand how it works. Is that we pick all our cherries, they go down to the pack house, and they're graded by a machine into, are they really good cherries or are they not? Are they seconds essentially? The really good cherries are the ones that we want to sell at a high price. Do the New Zealand supermarkets want to buy them at that high price? No, they don't. So they head overseas. What the New Zealand supermarkets like to do is buy the not so good ones at a low price and then sell them to you at a high price. So this is where buying direct from the farmer, whether it's your leg of lamb or your cherries or your apples or whatever it might be, is so important, because that is how you get the best produce, right? It's the same as walking down to the farmer's market and buying direct from the farmer, right? People who do that know what they get. And it's just like when you see a New Zealander try a Central Otago cherry for the first time, it's like they cry. It's that good. And the smiles and the cherry juice dripping down the kids' faces, it's just like it's absolutely magical, which is actually probably one of the other key reasons I got into cherries, is they bring joy to the world in ways that no other food does.
Yeah, great fruit, great choice. Now, what can you sort of tell us in short around the electric journey and how that's come together, and it's become such an important part of what you do, that
my
you're
entire
now known
identity
as Electric Cherries, right?
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing started, we had to buy a lot of machines to run a productive, farm, an economic unit of cherries. And how did it start? Like, first thing was having to fix an old diesel pump that came with the orchard that kept breaking down, and one day getting sunburnt because we were out in the sun all day fixing this bloody pump that just wouldn't start, and realizing this is a bit dumb. Shouldn't we buy a new pump and run it off the sun rather than off fuel source from the other side of the world? That led to putting solar on the roof, because our energy bill went down because we weren't paying so much in diesel, but our electricity bill went up, so that made solar economical. Then it led to buying, orchard utility vehicles, which are really souped off golf carts. We run flat land, 25 kilometres of cherry trees. It's really good for hooning around and, in golf carts. The golf guys had already solved this problem for us. So buying golf carts and putting new off-road tyres on them and lifting the suspension was a really good way to go. Then it became electric chainsaws and electric cars and stuff, because we could run off energy that we could create ourselves. And then we bought too many electric machines, and we weren't making enough energy anymore. So we had to go and put more solar in. And then we bought electric frost fighting fans, and then electric scissor lifts and mowers and all that kind of stuff. And then the final thing, the thing that we're running this whole podcast, powering the whole podcast off right now, is this electric tractor behind me.
Yeah, thanks for the juice.
Not at all. It's free from the sun of Central Otago. Thank the sun up there for this, the beautiful power that we get. But ultimately that was the final piece of the puzzle. And so when I started this whole thing, I didn't really plan to go fully electric. But the economics and the doing the numbers and then the passion for trying to solve these problems kind of always led us down that electric path. And by the time we got to 2022, it was like the last piece that we need is the electric tractor. The trees are growing up now. We need a tractor. We can't get by without a tractor anymore. And all of a sudden, there was a tractor on the market in San Francisco.
It wasn't exactly on the market. You had to twist some arms to get it.
It was, it was on the US market. It definitely wasn't on the New Zealand market. And then on the other side of that now, we've had our fair share of issues with electric technology because we're living on the bleeding edge. But I love it. I love being an entrepreneur and living on the bleeding edge and solving problems and demonstrating to others what can be done. That comes with problems like the fact that the tractor still goes, but the company that makes it doesn't.
Yeah. Buying from a Silicon Valley startup, you have those risks, but it's put you in this position where you're really differentiated from others. There's a lot of attention on what you're doing. How does it stack up for you numbers wise? I think you mentioned, was it 120K to establish your solar panels?
To run through the numbers super quickly, to buy 21 electric machines rather than the diesel machines, we spent about $420,000 more on capital, which is no bank would bank us because they all thought we were overcapitalizing in a cherry farm, spending another $420,000. It's a lot of money considering, the total thing probably costs $4 or $5 million to set up, right? So, but the operational savings on that was so significant that it was like a 13-year payback period, including the cost of finance on machines that we expect to last 20 years now.
Right. And more reliable being electric, just like you were talking about with your diesel pump and that going wrong. When you're on electric, these things are, lower maintenance and higher reliability.
For pumps and things like that, 100%. For tractors, maybe not quite. Living on the bleeding edge, there's things that go wrong. But that's part of the journey there. But that was $400,000, including the cost of finance at say 5.5%, right? But the savings meant that I could pay it off in 13 years. Now that the bloody Outrun war has happened, the savings it's just mental, like how fast that's going to affect the payback period on going down this path. So that's been interesting. And also, when we got a couple of government grants, demonstration grants for the tractor to import that from San Francisco and the frost fighting fans from South Africa. And so those government grants brought it down to about 8 years. So from that perspective alone, totally worth it for our business to go ahead and do this, especially since we started with a blank canvas and we needed to buy other machines anyway. When you run a fully electric orchard, you use a lot of electricity, a lot. And so that's what makes solar really, really viable. The complete capital return on investment for those solar panels in the field out there is 5.5 years, right? Because we're saving all this money by not buying power from somebody else, from an electricity landlord, and we're pushing all this power back to the grid and earning a good profit from it now. So, that's $120,000 worth of solar panels that makes $30,000 worth of electricity a year. If you then look at the fact that you're saving all this money by not buying it at 30 cents a kilowatt hour instead of generating it at 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what the amortized rate works out to be when you include the cost of finance
in this region,
in this region in particular, the savings is huge, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing here is, a lot of people haven't really paired that up yet. When it's like, well, if you run solar, you want to run electric machines so you can use the energy that you can create yourself. And it's like the sum of all of this it's greater than the sum of its parts, right? Like it's huge. The way that it works together now is quite phenomenal. And as our staff now, it's quite incredible. All our staff that work here have all got electric vehicles because they can charge on the farm for free. So it's a really good employment perk that we can do that costs us nothing. That sets us apart, especially during these times where the cost of traveling and driving around this country is so high at the moment. So super powerful. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen one guy buy the new electric 4-wheel drive Ute, the Radara, and there's a Polestar around here as well.
We saw that earlier. I think it's left.
They're charging our cars there for free. So our business has created 2 new electric cars in the New Zealand market just by being electric, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Before we finish up on Electric Cherries, because I'm keen to delve into what that's inspired in terms of leading to the formation of Rewiring Aotearoa as a non-profit. How do you look at it from a business success perspective?
Yeah, for now, I don't want to expand this any further. This orchard is my family's asset. It's my business partner's family's asset. How do we make, the revenue will probably have a top line amount that we're going to be able to get that might vary year to year. So now it's all about how do we run this really efficiently as a family business that returns us good dividends every year like any good investment should. And then the rest of this now is about, that's an asset over the side. We've got some investments in other things, other startups, which is pretty cool. And now the other part of it is, well, what do we do? How do we expand impact without expanding risk? And so that's what I'm all about now is telling people the story and doing the numbers on the rest of New Zealand and getting them on the journey, which is what Rewiring Aotearoa is all about.
Yeah, fantastic. It's sharing what works, how that's good for New Zealand, even breaking that down to numbers so folks can come in and into your website and actually work out, should they be generating their own power versus
I think and it's education, it's marketing, it is policy. So telling the government what needs to happen and getting them excited about what could happen if they enact the right policy. It's from fighting the incumbents. It's representing New Zealanders against the energy system. Like we get shafted at the moment, quite frankly, by the rules and the regulations that exist that stop us from being paid fairly for this kind of stuff. And
right. So if you're selling back to the grid, for most Kiwis, it's not necessarily a great transaction.
Not a true reflection of the value of the power and the contribution that you're making. Yeah. So we have to fight for that. We also have to fight for the equity piece, which is, you and I are on our journey somewhere along the way, and we can afford to do this. Most of the people that are listening to this show can probably afford to do this, or their parents can afford to do this, and so that's really powerful. What do we do about all the New Zealanders that can't afford to do this? That could benefit so massively from it being done. So those are all, parts of what we're, really, really trying to work on. And I think, like, if we use the analogy of Fishburners, it's like New Zealand is now one large co-working space, right? We're all doing different businesses, but what can we all do together? What is in the New Zealand's best interests, is something that I'm really, really passionate about. This is moving beyond politics. This is no longer left versus right. This is New Zealand people's interests versus the vested interests of people that are not the New Zealand people, and whether that's big corporates that are in New Zealand, or whether that's overseas energy companies, whatever that might be, representing what's best for New Zealand people is ultimately what I care really deeply about now, and I probably am in a fortunate enough position where I have enough security to have the time to care deeply about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. For our listeners, what would be, I guess, your biggest, tip of something that listeners could sort of put into action in terms of how they operate or lead in business today, and then maybe we'll come to sort of recommendations on from an electrification perspective. But from your journey, you've got so many lessons and so on.
I mean, if we look at what's the thing that I'm most happy about that I ever did was to quit my job and start a company. Right. So the first thing is, anyone who's looking at starting a company now, it's Friday that we're recording this. Resign on Monday. Get in there, give it a crack, get it done. All those opportunities will open. Fortune will favor the brave the moment that you're in a position where you're actually doing this. So that's my number one piece of advice, is just commit and go in and get it done. And there will always be, the opportunity on the other side. If things don't work out, there'll be new opportunities that, come about. And especially if you're young, if you're in your early 20s, you might have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but you might not be married yet. You might not have a mortgage. You might not have children. Now is 100% the time to do it. As it gets older and you're married and you have kids, it's substantially harder. There's more commitments, more responsibilities, that kind of thing. So that would be the number one thing. As you're building a business, my favorite saying in entrepreneurship of all time is you can't trip a centipede. The more customers that you have, the better off you are. The more investors you have, the better off you are. If you're beholden, it's very easy to trip a one-legged man, isn't it? So making sure that you're building a business that is scalable and something that can be used by a lot of people is also super important. And I just think this, it's often romanticized, building startups and selling startups and exiting and being wealthy and all that kind of thing. None of this is an overnight success, and don't trick yourself into thinking it is. And I think, in startup world in particular, mental health issues are a real problem, and that's because we always look at all the people that are doing well and never really look at the people that maybe aren't doing so well. There's a lot of businesses that will never succeed, and a lot of entrepreneurs that will never quite get to that glamorous exit that everybody thinks about. But there's so much that can be learned along the way, and I just think, look after yourself, realize that it's not all roses on the other side, and I just cannot get over how much of a lesson that I went through, a journey that I went to now be in the position that I'm in. I'm very thankful for the position that I'm in, but that journey was hard work, real hard work, and it was combined with a lot of luck. And that's the other thing I want to stress. Those people out there that would say, I worked hard to be where I am, don't understand the realities of the situation. Yes, you worked hard, but you also had a lot of luck.
Yeah. And there's a reality that it's also not for everyone. So there is that weighing up that everyone needs to do if you're going to make that commitment and quit the job. I've kind of, listened through the
100%.
podcast, look at the harder stuff people have to deal with, because you've got to commit to that, because as you say, this is something that takes a
and I
period of
could
time.
not have done this without the discipline of my wife, and she is not an entrepreneur at all, and I think that's super important to acknowledge and understand as well, that our relationship works and our business and our success has worked because our skills complement each other and our thinking complements each other. We would be bankrupt 30 times over if I was the one in charge of the money. But, at the same time, she freely admits that we'd probably be living in a 3-bedroom house in suburban Wellington if I wasn't in charge of the risk taking. So, it goes both ways. And yeah, there are plenty of people out there that might be interested in entrepreneurship and tech that might not want to be in a position to start a technology startup. K to Pi, that is absolutely fine. Like, it's your journey and you're on it and you're the one at the wheel. You get to steer it in the direction you want it to go, right?
Yeah, yep. And for those who are interested in, using solar or other New Zealand generated energy, what is your general recommendation to business owners?
Yeah, for business owners, it's like there's machines that you're going to have control over. There's machines that you're not going to have control over, especially if you're renting the property. But just doing the sums is super important. You'll be shocked, I think, at how much money you are leaving on the table by not electrifying and not running off New Zealand-made energy and not putting solar on the roof. And especially if you're a CFO or an accountant and you're listening to this, make sure you do the numbers, because I think it's a discipline that is energy economics is a discipline that's missing from finance in a big way at the moment, that we need to really get on top of, because when you do it, you're like, wow, even the amortized cost, this is just an absolute no-brainer. And so, yeah, that's where I would land. Negotiating with the landlord, putting solar on the roof is an expense that they will have to pay, but you can contribute towards that and still save the money by not buying it from the electricity landlord, right? So
yeah, we've all got to pay for power.
We've all got to pay for
one
power.
way or another.
And I think that's the other thing to keep in mind is that, people are like, oh, the capital expense is too high, I'm not going to do it at the moment. They neglect to think about, if you don't do it, the opportunity cost is continuing to pay that electricity or that energy landlord for as long as you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And that is a substantial amount of money when you add it up. You're going to run that business for the next 10 years. It's almost certain you're better off in electric machines. You don't have to do it all at once. The next time a machine breaks, make sure you replace it with the electric option. If you're a restaurant owner, when the gas cooktop gives way, put an electric induction cooktop instead. Yes, there's a bit of change involved with doing that, but you're not going to be gassing your staff for a start. That's a really good thing. It's going to be a lot cooler and more comfortable to cook in the kitchen, and it's going to save you a lot of money. That's powerful.
Excellent. Well, Mike Casey, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real privilege to come out here to Electric Cherries.
Well, and thank you for coming down. As you know, I love to talk, and I love to talk about myself, and you've given me a great opportunity to do that. So thank you for those that are, still listening. Thanks, heaps.
Okay. Cheers, Mike.
Talk soon.
Ciao.
I hope you caught on this episode that I really enjoyed visiting Mike Casey and Electric Cherries there in Cromwell. If you'd like to learn more from Mike and his insights and his stories, then listen into our New Zealand Tech Podcast episode, and you'll find a link in the show notes. Listen in, and this is where he shares about the uplift from technology and electrification that they've had at Forest Lodge Orchard, and there's a chunk more in there too. New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by One New Zealand, alongside Gorilla Technology, making tech enablement and cybersecurity easy for mid-size and smaller businesses, and by Outrun Global, remote staffing to help your local teams work smarter, not harder. Now be sure to listen in to our other episodes featuring many of New Zealand's most successful leaders, including Brooke Roberts of Sharesies, Sir Peter Beck of Rocket Lab, Cecilia Robinson of My Food Bag, Sir Stephen Tyndall, and many more. And be sure to share this episode with a friend or colleague who you know will benefit from it. Now, I have a question. How seamless and proactively is technology managed in your organisation? The reason I'm asking you to think about this is because this week a CFO told me that the technology onboarding he received from Gorilla Technology was the best he'd ever experienced. That's because the Gorilla team care about the individual and delivering tech that works for you. So when a new team member starts at a company that Gorilla Technology provides IT services to, we give them a very personalized introduction to how to use the tech and what to be aware of from a cybersecurity perspective. Get in touch if you'd like that level of personal care and attention. Thank you for listening in. This is Paul Spain signing out. I'll catch you again on the next episode. See ya.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.